Is Zimbabwe reversing policy on land seizures? The government is offering to return land to white farmers forced off their properties 20 years ago. But is this enough to resolve one of the most divisive policies from the Mugabe era? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Hashem Ahelbarra. The issue of who owns the land in Zimbabwe is controversial. 2 decades ago, former President Robert Mugabe violently evicted thousands of white farmers and gave the properties to black families. He said it was to address colonial imbalances. But critics argue the policy destroyed the economy. Mugabe's successor, Emmerson Mnangagwa, appears to be trying to make amends. His government says foreign white farmers can apply to have the land back or be given a different plot. It follows an agreement in July to pay $3.5 billion in compensation. Mnangagwa first made the promise in 2017, just after President Mugabe was forced from office.
Whilst there is a lot we may need to do by way of outcomes, the principle of repossessing our land cannot be challenged or reversed. My government is committed to compensating those farmers from whom land was taken in terms of our laws of the land.
The first attempt to distribute land more fairly started in 1980. That was when Zimbabwe gained independence from white minority rule and most arable land was owned by white farmers. Under the policy, the government did not force the sale of land. But in 2000, former President Mugabe began forcibly seizing areas from white farmers. The move triggered controversy inside Zimbabwe and was condemned by the international community. By 2009, agricultural revenues dropped by $12 billion. Some sectors later recovered, with Zimbabwe's tobacco sales reaching record levels in 2018. Let's bring in our panel, all joining us from Harare. Joining us on the phone, Vince Musewe, an economist and investment consultant. Obert Gutu is a former spokesman for the Movement for Democratic Change, a Zimbabwean opposition party. And Rejoice Ngwenya is a political analyst. Welcome to all of you. Vince, what is the government trying to do here? Is it trying to reverse Mugabe's land reform or just backtracking on some aspects of it?
I think that is not factual. I think someone just created that narrative. There is no reversal of a land reform. In other words, those individuals, for example, who got land under the reform, the land will not be taken back. The policy is very clear, right? Number one, there are those properties that were protected by the Bilateral Investment and Promotion Protection Act, where Zimbabwe entered into agreement with international countries who then sent foreigners to invest in land. Those people will get their land back, right? And number two, there are black farmers who had title, who had valid title prior to 2000, whose farms were taken over, and they also are entitled to get their farms back. That is the only thing that is happening at this stage. So this narrative that it is being reversed is not correct.
All right. Let me go to Obert. Obert, your party has been talking about this particular issue in the past, and it seems that this is quite a delicate issue, to the point where the government started with compensation in July. Now it's talking about returning land, then saying that we're talking just about very special cases. Where does the MDC stand here?
Let me start by just clarifying for the benefit of all the viewers that I'm a former spokesperson. I'm the former national spokesperson of the MDCs. I'm speaking in my individual capacity as a political analyst. So the views I'm articulating are my views.
Fair enough.
So let me also hasten that what has happened is actually what I would prefer to call a rationalization of the land reform program as opposed to a reversal of the land reform program. We all remember distinctly that the land reform program in Zimbabwe started in earnest at the turn of the new millennium, around the year 2000. And obviously, there were a lot of other issues that were happening that were not entirely consistent with the requirements of the law, especially instances where indigenous people, by indigenous I'm talking of black Zimbabweans, who had acquired their farms using their own private means way before the beginning of the land reform program. Some of them had those farms that they had privately acquired. They had those farms compulsorily acquired by the state in terms of the Land Acquisition Act. And we also know of farms owned under the what we call the BIPA, the Bilateral Investment Promotion and Protection Agreements. And these farms were also taken over by the state during the onset or at the onset of the land reform program at the turn of the new millennium. So what the government is simply doing now is to try to bring sanity, to bring rationality into the land reform program.
I see your point.
It didn't make any sense to have people who had acquired their farms and they had been previously historically disadvantaged having their farms taken away from them. So those people are now going to have their farms returned to them. And you are not talking of a lot of people, especially the people under BIPA. They don't number anything in excess of 40. You're looking at plus or minus 40.
Rejoice, you must have heard Obert talking about the government trying to bring rationality to the land redistribution program by Robert Mugabe. But when you look at what has been happening over the last few months, the government saying initially we're just compensating the white farmers for the infrastructure that was put in place in the land that was taken away from them. Now they're talking about compensation, but they're saying that it does not mean that we are going to necessarily bring them back their own parcels, but we're trying to find alternative land for them. Why is the government very cautious about how to move forward?
Well, they have to be cautious, Hashem, because we stated many years ago that violating property rights, you trigger a whole domino effect of lawlessness. So I don't see how they are going to be able to repair that damage. The point is that this is 20 years down the line, Hashem, and I think most farmers really have moved on. And to say that you are going to be going around, scrounging around the world looking for finance to compensate. The optics, I don't agree with Vincent and Obert here. The optics on the ground, the grassroots, the optics are that there is a reversal of expropriation without compensation, because this is the ideology that Mugabe propounded, the ideology of taking back from the colonialist and giving it back to the black man. So on the ground, the optics are that that is being reversed. So it is taking a lot of effort for this government to explain itself. And whenever this government is explained, this is a government that has a woeful, record of human rights violations. They do not, adhere to the Constitution. They don't keep their own laws. So it will be surprising to see these guys pulling this through. But I think that on the ground, this is why the war veterans yesterday at the media center were sending this signal, Hashem, that this is a reversal. And I'm sure that this is the kind of damage that this government has got to try and reverse in terms of what the signal is on the ground, Hashem.
Vince, you've just heard what Rejoice has been saying. Basically, this is a reversal. This is backtracking on a narrative that has been prevailing for decades in Zimbabwe, that Mugabe has been trying to address an historical mistake by colonialism. Now, what kind of message is the government sending to the Zimbabweans who have become now landowners?
Well, the message is basically nothing much is going to change. In other words, no white farmer besides the foreign farmers are going to go and be given land. But, let's be very clear here. I also want to correct Rejoice. There was never an agreement post-independence of expropriation without compensation. Let's be very clear on that. In the Lancaster House Agreement, there was agreement on a 10-year period after which the government would acquire the land and there would be funders, would be the British and whatever happened. And then obviously that didn't happen. The reason why we had to go back to this mentality of expropriation without compensation was on how the land reform was actually carried out. That was never the intention, even constitutionally, because currently we have a constitution that acknowledges that farmers have to be compensated, and that constitution got 95% approval by all Zimbabweans. So I think at this stage there's a lot of emotion and a lot of confusion. And let's be very clear, there are different categories of white people. No black farmer who was allocated land, for example, under the A2 farmers, that is going to be taken off that land. Mm-hmm. That is not going to happen.
Okay.
So but to me, this is mainly carrying emotions of pre-independence, because from independence there was never an agreement of expropriation without compensation.
Well, listening to you, gentlemen, I feel like this is a chaotic process that needs to be smoothened, finalized in a way or another. Obert, now, I understand when you say this is something which has been done carefully, thoroughly, to bring about a genuine change to the legacy of Mugabe. Now, the question is President Emmerson Mnangagwa trying to pivot away from the legacy of Robert Mugabe, or is he just doing this for the international reputation of his own country?
The way I look at it really is President Emmerson Mnangagwa and his government. As you know, they have branded themselves as the Second Republic. You are looking at the optics to say they are styling themselves as the Second Republic, trying to distinctly differentiate themselves from what we might then call the First Republic under Robert Mugabe, where they say, look, we are the Second Republic. We have to be seen to be doing things differently, being people who obey and uphold the dictates of the law. And the most important thing that they're trying to do is to say the supreme law of the land in Zimbabwe is the Constitution. And as Vincent rightly pointed out, this Constitution was adopted in May 2013. No less than 93% of the people who voted actually voted yes. So it was an overwhelming approval of the new Constitution of Zimbabwe, which Constitution we're using now. And let me hasten to add that in terms of Section 295 of that particular Constitution that we are using, it makes it very clear that all those people who are indigenous Zimbabweans, or put differently, people who were historically disadvantaged, and of necessity, these are black people, as I've already said earlier on, who acquired their funds prior to the onset of the land reform program in the year 2000, February 2000, to be precise. Those people are going to have their land returned to them. And in circumstances where that land can no longer be returned to them, then they will be given compensation, full compensation, that is, at commercial going rates for both the land and the improvements on their parts. And this is actually different from the former white commercial farmers. Those will be compensated. And if you look at the agreement that was structured and signed on the 29th of July, it talks about compensation for improvements on those farms, and not the land. So we will go back. There.
We will go back to that aspect and talk a little bit about some of its details. Rejoice, there is a difference between bringing about a change because you are genuine about change and doing this just because you're feeling the heat of the international pressure. There's no investment coming to the country, no international backing of the government, and therefore they're presenting this as somehow a window dressing to say, you know what, this is a post-Mugabe era.
Absolutely, Hashem. It's interesting because Mnangagwa took over government in 2017. Of course, he triggered some regulatory and policy changes here and there, for instance, tampering around with Indigenous Nation Act and so forth. Now, my point, really, I keep on making the point that basically the property rights clauses in the Constitution are very contradictory. There are many reasons why even the MDCs, allowed this thing to go through. Obviously, we cannot, we don't have much time to talk about that. But, the chaos that this process has triggered, there is absolutely no way this government can be able to raise $3.5 billion of their own. So this is a token thing, Hashem. The emotional and the psychological destruction that this thing caused, there's no capacity to repay back. So the farmers have moved on.
Vince, you are the economist. And let's do some simple math here. You've heard Rejoice saying that basically where is the government going to get the $3.5 billion for the compensation? And how are you going to allocate new parcel land for those who are going to be compensated or given alternative land? You're talking about a mammoth task within the very heart of an unprecedented financial crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me start at the beginning, Hashem. This is obviously also a PR exercise. Let us not just look at it as the land issue, because we have always said that if you resolve the land issue, we are actually going to trigger economic recovery, because, as you know, 70% of the Zimbabwe population is dependent on agriculture, and the indirect addition to industry, 60% of industry inputs come from agriculture, right? So the idea, it does not stop with just giving people back land. That land also has to be productive. Okay, so let's be clear that this is a big idea to say, how do we actually attract foreign exchange into Zimbabwe? And why don't we then package agriculture so that we can attract money coming into Zimbabwe and we can trigger the economy? Clearly, the international market is a different space now, and it's not going to be easy to actually raise the money. But in my view, it's not going to be impossible either. Because let me give you an example. In the last 2 years alone, we have what we call command agriculture here. Okay, the government has actually spent about $5 billion under command agriculture, where they structured a deal where the private sector was able to come in and actually fund agriculture. So, I'm not pessimistic about the possibility of actually raising the money. And remember, too, the people who are going to be compensated have got some kind of networks internationally who actually want also to see this thing, come to an end. So I think if the government and the farmers get together, they can possibly raise that money. What is also important here, I think, is that, and I think Rejoice is correct in that the issue of implementation by this government has always been questionable. So we are not saying, listen, everything is now honky-dory. This is now the policy that everything is going to work out. There's a lot of conflicts of interest. There's a lot of underhand deals. How do we ensure, for example, that ministers who got 7 farms actually end up with 1 farm as opposed to 7 farms? And who gets those 7 farms or 6 farms that they lose? Do they get allocated to the black people, to the black title holders who lost? And another issue which has come through, the white commercial farmers in Zimbabwe as Zimbabwean citizens must be allowed to participate in agriculture as under the constitution as citizens.
Obert, the Zimbabweans are skeptical or concerned about some of the framing that is taking place as we speak in the country, like those who are the proponents of the supporters of the returning land to the white farmers are saying that we have to do it because we are no longer self-sufficient the way we used to be prior to 2000. But black farmers will tell you at the same time, we are not to blame because we are paying the price of decades of marginalization.
In fact, like I said earlier on, The land reform program, when it started at the turn of the new millennium, February 2000, there is no denying that it was violent. There is no denying that it was chaotic, because you'd have people just moving on to any farm that they choose to go to and chasing away the white commercial farmers and saying, we have taken over, and they took over. So what I believe the government is trying to do now is to rationalize. But there is a lot of work to be done. Mm-hmm. And I agree with what Vincent was saying. It is not just the rationalization in terms of the signing of this agreement with the white commercial farmers that will cure the several shortcomings that afflict the land reform process in Zimbabwe. There is the issue of multiple land owners. It is a fact that some people actually own several farms. There is a report of one politically well-connected family that owns no less than 23 or 24 commercial farms in prime land, natural regions 1 and 2 of Zimbabwe. Mm-hmm. And these are the issues that land audit
that need to be addressed.
Address. So we should also look at the land audit and this agreement.
Okay.
We should look at them at the same time and try to bring sanity to the land issues in Zimbabwe.
I see your point. Rejoice, we're talking about as if this is going to suddenly change the face of the country to the better. But we forget at the same time that Zimbabwe does have to deal with severe drought, shortage in foreign currency, and that half of the population is food insecure. So what's the way forward to address the economic crisis in the country and to change the living standards of the people for the better?
Well, look, Hashem, as a liberal activist myself, I really do appreciate the direction that the government is taking, acknowledging, Hashem, acknowledging the importance of private property rights. That's very important, because other than the negative optics that are on the ground, the global, signals are very positive in the sense that for the first time, the foreign direct investors and international partners have some kind of hope that this government is going towards the right direction. But that is a small portion of the panacea, because we still need to deal with matters, Hashem, of human rights. How do you invest in a country where there is arbitrary arrest, where people are kidnapped, where there's no rule of law? I wish I would be as positive as Obert, but my doubt is that there are other things in the pot that need to be handled, especially human rights.
I see your point. Vince, this is going to be my last question to you. This is a country that obviously needs to modernize its economic sector. It has to move forward. At the same time, as Rejoice was saying, it has also to change politically, to open up the political establishment and to reach out to the opponents and to the critics. All these factors, we have no indication whatsoever from the government that it is genuine to pave the way for a vibrant democracy.
Yeah, we are all very concerned because some of us have been saying, talking about what needs to happen. We need a totally new economic vision. The way we are doing things right now is that we basically took over the institutional framework and the behaviors from Mugabe, where there were cultures and ways of doing things that were entrenched over a 38-year period. And you are not going to change that over 2 years. Nor are you going to change the language, because you can even see some of the language our politicians are, is the same language that used to be, that we all fought against. So we need a paradigm shift. And to me, that paradigm shift is not going to happen if the politicians continue arguing and one this side and one that side, and Zimbabweans are not part of the solution. That's why I am, for example, thinking we need actually a Marshall Plan for Zimbabwe. But that Marshall Plan can only happen when the private sector, when government, when labor, and when civic people come to the table and shape a new vision of an inclusive Zimbabwe that creates an inclusive economy. Because if we continue doing what we are doing, we are not going to create new results. So we need to change the people making decisions. We need to change the structures and the institutional structure and clean up on old mindsets that are actually arresting progress in this country.
Vince, Musewe, Obert, Gutu and Rejoice, Ngwenya, thank you very much for your time and for your insight. And thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AGA Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AGA Inside Story. From me, Hashem Ahelbarra, and the entire team here in Doha. Bye for now.